Hey, what's going on out there, YouTube family? This is Samuel Legger here, representing Team JVS. I'm back here again for another movie review. This is another small acts film by Steve McQueen. He directed, wrote. The name of this one is Red, White, and Blue. Not what you think. The backdrop of this is Red, White, and Blue tells a true story of Leroy Logan, a young forensic scientist with a yearning to do more than solidarity laboratory work. The spotlights the true story of him. At a young age, saw his father assaulted by two police officers, motivating him to join the Metropolitan Police and change their racist attitudes from within. We've seen this, technically. Even if you go from just the line that Denzel Washington says in Training Day, and he's talking to Ian Oik, or Ethan Hawke's character, in kind of breaking down, like it takes a wolf to take a wolf. But the whole point behind what his conversation in that specific moment was that you have to be in this to make a change. You have to stick into this to make a difference. And there's a line at the end of this movie I felt that was so profound. I'm not going to say who said it, but it was basically along the lines of, the elevation of change and progression is something that is a slow moving wheel. And that identifies everything about this film, and the whole purpose behind why Leroy, as a man, as a character, within the confounds of this film, his motivation for everything that he's doing, because he's athletic, he's smart, he's engaging, he's got a beautiful wife, he's got a very interesting family dynamic, because it's almost like he's got two different moms. He got a sister, and he's got a father that technically is alienating everybody around him, not just from an anger standpoint, but from a paranoia standpoint, from a progressive mental thought on everything that's happening around him. It provokes him to go and project onto his family members, and specifically impressioning on his son, where in the very early parts of this, like, his son is kind of like watching certain things happen. He's getting like conversations with one of his best friends who's, working towards being in law enforcement, and telling him you can do this, you're more than capable from a physicality standpoint, from a mental standpoint. You can easily go and rise to the occasion of this. And from that point, even before that, actually, there's a altercation that happens very early when he's very young, and some police officers kind of come up to him and not just racially profile him, they abuse, in my opinion, their power to interact with him, which is very commonality with anybody that is, African American, minority, in basic society. It happens all the time, and sometimes it happens also to anybody. But in this specific case, and in connection with this specific narrative, there is a specific police system that has systemic racism in it, and there's bigotry, there's abuse. But the thing about this film that I think I really appreciated is they showed the sneaky side of all this. Like, it wasn't like in the very first movie, Mangrove, where it's like they were just going and doing stuff and abusing. The things that were happening to Leroy and around him, it was all done not physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and authoritatively. Like, from authority standpoint, one of the first conversations that he has when he's choosing to want to go and to do law enforcement is somebody asks him a question: has anybody in your family had an issue with the law? And like, in his head, and this is the thing I gotta say with John Boyega. John Boyega really does carry the emotive and the progression, heart value behind why this character, even moments where he wasn't sure about himself, you still felt his motivation to do good. Even when there's temptation for him to go and abuse that, or even there's temptations for him to go and just kind of like push things aside, he still decides like, this is why I'm here. This is the narrative why I'm actually here. But in that specific situation, it was kind of like he was looking at them like, and I knew in his head, and that's why I said from a Telegraph standpoint and from an eye standpoint, and the way that John Boyega was able to act in this, he said so much with his exterior that like, what are you trying to imply? What are you trying to say? And even with his answer, it still was looked down upon. And it was crazy because while he was going through his training and stuff like that, I was like, oh, okay, this seems cool. But I was like, wow, let's wait until you actually get into the precinct. Let's see what happens from this point. And I think that the other part of this is the dad. The dad is going through so much because, again, he went through an abusive situation that happened with law enforcement. And for him, he not only didn't want his son to be put in harm's way or in jeopardy, but that was the last thing that he wanted. He was like, he's been pushing his son to do this and do that. And that wasn't what he wanted to do. Now, this was acted by Steve Townsend. I think he does a really good job from an acting standpoint of playing like this strong father figure, but at the same exact time, a meek, broken down, and torn man. Because all interactions that he has with John Boyega's Leroy is very stagnant, is very disconnected, is very timid at times, it's very sad at times. And I think that between their chemistry and their connection with stuff, even though like sometimes I was kind of like, this is a little cringy, but it really does work in the execution of how this actual movie goes and progresses. The hardest parts about this, again, it's not so much the physical. Normally with a film like this, like you got like this physical oppression, you got all these kind of things that are happening, you know, like blatant actual things and acts that are happening against a person. It's very few films that really do touch on the words and the verbiage and the sneakiness, the sneaky side of how racial discrimination can actually be. And this film slowly builds into it. By the second act and by the third act, you're just like, wow. The only thing, and this is the other thing about this, as well as all the rest of the films I've seen so far, I think that all the black people that I've seen in these films, specifically even with Leroy, he's very in your face. Like at a certain point, everybody has a breaking point. I totally get it. And I think that what brings me so much worry and concern and anxiety most of the time with all these different films, specifically in this one, was when he does lash back out. When he does talk back. When he does say, no, I can't take that. No, that's not good enough. Because in my head, there's a trigger that's actually in my head, that's in my heart, that says, oh, he's about to die, or he's about to get abused, or something's about to get hurt, or somebody might get raped, or somebody might get torn apart, or somebody's business might get, like, in my head, like, as an actual critic, I'm being, fearful and timid to the reactions that he's given because of the situation that even that I'm in, from a day-to-day life standpoint. I'm like, oh man, don't do that, because then that's an excuse for somebody to really hurt you. Oh, don't say that, because that's an excuse for them to really go and dig in and get you where they want you to be. But I mean, the thing about these films, it makes me question, how much of that is righteousness and intellect and godly wisdom, and how much of that is fear and what's the word? What's a good word? Conditioning. Fear and conditioning, based on the circumstance of how you have to be able to train yourself to live in a world like this as a minority, as a black person. I had to question that within myself. And that's part of the reason why I'm making sure that I'm being very specific. The way that Steve McQueen shoots these films is amazing. he builds anxiety perfectly. He knows how to utilize certain actors, such as John Boyega, to really push home a narrative in the most expressive way. The other thing I'll say about John Boyega, he would be a very good villain. Like, he'd be a very good villain. If he was on the other side of all this, like, I would be very intimidated to what he's capable of. Like, because he is very expressive of an actor, but also very poignant and very particular in his mannerisms and the way that he can actually project certain things when he's acting. This also does star Antonia Thomas. She is in, what's the show that I do like? The Good Doctor. But when I first saw her was in The Misfits. But I think that she does a really good job in this role. In terms of the scripting for it, I think it progresses pretty well. It ends in a way that is like, dang. One thing I wish that this would have ended was kind of like the way that Mangrove ended. This is based on a true story. I need to know context of where this character goes from that point. And at the end of this doesn't say anything. There's no context. There's no, verbiage of where the character is. Where the person is or what happened with them at all. So that's the only thing I would say is a big negative to me. I think that would have been, because at the end of the day, you have to recollect what was the meaning and the purpose and the drive behind positioning everything with this specific story. Like, what are you trying to say with what this person has gone through? And was this in vain, or was this in truth and a righteous level of perspective? So I think that's my only fault, really, the biggest fault that I have with this film. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this review. I will rest this at a 7.5 or 8 out of 10. I did really actually enjoy it. It was really hard to watch, and it was like gut wrenching emotionally and expressively, and it did not help my anxiety. I'll talk to you guys later. Keep it locked. JVS, we ain't gonna stop. Peace, guys.